So this is the review video for a 9.8 to 9.9 review. This was so that you will be prepared for your quiz later this week. So let's go ahead and start number one. Square root of x minus 4 is outside of the radical and then equals 20. So these first four problems are all solving radicals where we do the same steps that we practiced in class, where we start by isolating the radical. So we are going to add 4 to both sides here because we're trying to get the square root of x all by itself. So now we have square root of x equals 24. Then you don't want that radicals to remain there, so that's why the second step we wrote down in our notes was to square both sides. So at this point we square both sides so that the square root and the squared here cancel out and you're just left with an x. And then if you need a calculator to help you calculate 24 squared, you can type that in, which would be 576. So that is the answer. That is the answer you would put on Michigan Virtual's quiz or test, and then we would check it. So the reason I check my work is just in case I either made a mistake or if there's an extraneous answer here. So we're plugging this 576 back in for this x, and this is what I have so far. Okay, so we're adding 4. I'm sorry, we're not solving here. We're deciding, is it actually equal from the left side to the right side? So I can check square root of 576 minus 4. And yes, that is 20 equals 20. So you can either type the entire thing in, or you could just say square root of 576 is 24. I know when I subtract 4, I'll get 20. So that does work out. Let's try the next one. Same idea. We are dividing by 4 on both sides here because it was multiplication, and to undo multiplication, we divide. So we have square root of x equals 12, and then we square both sides. So we are left with x equals 144 because this 12 squared is 144. And remember, the reason we do this is so that the squared and the square root can cancel out. And so again, we would check our work. For root 144, we're asking, does it equal 48? And we know the square root of 144, or you can check if you don't know, but I know it's 12. So 4 times 12 is definitely 48. So again, this one checks out. Both those are good so far. No extraneous solutions to worry about yet. Let's try the next one. The next one looks a little different, where now we have radicals, 2 of them, not just one pair of radicals, and they're both on the same side. We need to move it so that it's onto the other side. So go ahead and start by adding square root of 2x plus 1 to both sides like that. And we get square root 3x plus 5 is equal to, and 0 does nothing there, so it's just square root of 2x plus 1. So our goal here is to start by getting radicals on both sides here, because my next step, remember, is to square both sides. And as soon as I go to square both sides, both radicals from both sides will disappear. So I can square this side and this one. And now I just have 3x plus 5 is equal to 2x plus 1. And then from here, it's a simple linear equation with variables on both sides. So I need to move this variable, the 2x, to the other side so that I can get x's all by themselves. And I prefer to move the smaller number, so that's why I subtracted the 2x, because then I can avoid negatives. 3 minus 2 would give me just a 1x plus 5 equals 1. I want to subtract 5 so that I can get my x all by itself, and x does equal negative 4. All right, now we have to check. So square root of 3 times negative 4 plus 5 minus the square root of 2 times negative 4 plus 1 should equal 0. And so to decide if it is, you can either type all of this into the calculator. Oops, I didn't leave my plus 1. It has to be inside as well. You can either type it all in, or let's see what we come up with. So for the left hand, the first square root, we have negative 12 plus 5, which would be a negative 7. Square root of negative 7. Then we have subtract, and then do the same thing for the second one. 2 times negative 4 is negative 8. plus 1 would also be negative 7. So these do all work out. Usually the ones you're going to see also, the ones that cause an issue are going to be when you get two answers. Let's go ahead and look at that for number 4. But this negative 4 is absolutely okay for an answer, although it is a square root of a negative inside the radical. Because you're subtracting the 2 and getting 0, that's not creating any issues there. So this is the final answer. Number 4, we're going to start by squaring both sides again, but this time we only have one radical on one side, and then the other one is not just a number, it's got an x with it. So the first thing we know is that the left side, you get rid of that radical, so it's just x plus 3. But the right hand side, you have to write this out as x minus 3, because now I need to FOIL it or use box method to simplify. So the left side stays the same, but now the right hand side would be x squared, because you could do FOIL, x times x. Outer would be a negative 3x. Inner would be a negative 3x again. And finally, our last terms would be positive 9, because negative 3 times negative 3 is a positive 9, which again, you could have used the box instead. I'll show you the box on a future problem. So this combines. So we get x squared minus 6x plus 9. Still have x plus 3 over to the left there. And now you need to move everything to one side. So I want to move it to the side with the x squared being positive. So I want to subtract the x. You want to line them up. Same with the 3. You want to subtract the 3 and line it up with the number. So the reason I do that, and I'd like to do it all in one step here, is because now I've moved everything over. I just have 0 now on the one side. And x squared minus 7x, because think of it as a 1 if you need a 1 there, negative 1 in front of the x. Those two together will give me negative 7x. And plus 6, because 9 minus 3 is 6. This I need to now factor a little bit further. So I'm going to go ahead and now draw that little x to factor it, where I put 6 on top, negative 7 on the bottom, and you're asking yourself what two numbers multiply to give me 6 but add to give me negative 7. And so those two numbers are negative 6 and negative 1. And so when I put them into my two parentheses here, my factors, I get x minus 6, x minus 1. You want to set them both equal to 0 and solve. So one of your answers is 6, positive 6, and the next one would be a positive 1. So both those are answers, but when I look at the question on Michigan Virtual, you're going to notice it's just one answer. And the reason for that is because we have not checked our work yet. When we check for extraneous, we might see that one of these is going to be extraneous. And so let's see which one maybe that would be. So we have square root of 6 plus 3. So I'm starting with the 6, substituting it in for x everywhere I see an x. And we're asking, does it equal 6 minus 3? So square root of 6 plus 3 is square root of 9, which we know is 3. You can use your calculator for that, or you can write down square root of 9 first. 6 minus 3 is 3. Now those two things definitely equal each other. So 6 is a good answer that works. That's the one you would look for in Michigan Virtual, because it'll be multiple choice. You're just picking a solution. But for the 1, let's see what happens. 1 plus 3 inside the radical should equal, or does it equal, 1 minus 3. And the square root of 1 plus 3 is square root of 4, which is 2. But then 1 minus 3 is negative 2. Those two things are not exactly the same. They're similar, but they're not exactly the same. They have to have the exact same sign for that to work. So since that does not work, you need to now cross off the answer that didn't give you a correct check, and now you can say that that is extraneous. But remember, it's a multiple choice quiz, or the question here is going to be multiple choice, so you won't get to say anything about x equals 1. You would just select the answer x equals 6. So that's it for number 4. Number 5, we are classifying this by degree and number of terms. So we need to start by figuring out like kind of how many terms there are. I see 2 terms. You also want to look at the degree. The exponent there is a 5. The highest one, right? That's what degree means. And so the word that we use for 5 being the highest power is quintic. And this is all in your notes from 9.8, 9.9, where we talked about, it's back from unit 6 as well. We talked about it then as well. And so the degree, if you need to review up on it, cubed would be called, the 3 would be called a cubic, 4 is called quartic, 5 is quintic, and of course you should know quadratic for 2. But remember, you take the highest of the exponents. And then the word after that will be how many terms you have, which is 2. So it's the word binomial, quintic binomial. And that's it. So we'll go on to the next page. For the next page, though, you will need to use Desmos. So if you have the option, I'm going to show you Desmos on my phone, but you can use Desmos like typing it into just a browser and doing it that way for the quiz. You can also use a graphing calculator. It is a little bit more, there's a couple extra steps, though, with the graphing calculator versus Desmos. So let's go on to the next page where we'll do more with polynomials, specifically how to solve them and find their relative minimum. So these next 2 questions here, I'll write down that I'm going to use Desmos on these, or you could use a graphing calculator. It's again just a little bit harder to use a graphing calculator for it, though, just because it's a little bit more steps. But here is like the Desmos app if you're going to use just on a cell phone calculator, or if you want to use, again, Desmos on the computer. So let me just type in this equation. We have the negative 6x cubed. And then we have minus, I'll hold the phone up in case you can't see it after, but I'm just typing it in for a second. So negative 15x squared, and then we have plus 9x. And finally, I'm not going to write in the equals 0 part. The reason for that is because once I do that, I can't click on whatever my zeros are. So now I can come here and click these points. So I'll hold it up so you can see it a little bit better. So I have negative 3, 0. When you see those little dots, you can just tap them. If you're doing it on a cell phone, if you're using your computer, just use your mouse and click on each of those x-intercepts. That's what it means to solve the equation by graphing. So we have negative 3, 0, 0, 0, and 0.50. Those are the 3 answers that we have here. All right, so we're going to go ahead and write those 3 answers along with, I'll do a little sketch of a graph just so that you have it for later, but the answers are definitely negative 3, 0, and 0.5, 0.5. Okay, so those are the 3 answers you would look for the multiple choice section if it was multiple choice on the quiz, or typing in each of those answers if it was a short answer question. Here is the graph in case you just want to know kind of where everything is. So this is negative 3, then we have 0, and then 0.5. And it goes through negative 3 like this, comes back at 0, and comes back around. This is not perfectly drawn, it's just a sketch so that you can see, whoops, exactly what those zeros are. Okay, so we'll do the same thing for the next one, except now we're going to type in this new equation here, and we're finding the relative minimum for that. So this one, unfortunately, I didn't see until after that this equation isn't the best one in terms of finding the right zero. Michigan Virtual's equation should be a little bit better. So let me type this in first, and then I will hold it up so it's easier for you to see. So we have 8x cubed plus 19x squared minus 1x, or just an x is fine too, and then minus 25. So here is what the graph looks like when you first type it in, which is not much. You're going to need to either drag the screen up. You can also zoom in or out, which in this case I would zoom out a little, just because we're trying to find this point down here. And when I zoom in a little bit closer to that point, it almost looks like it's the y-intercept that's there, but until you go and click on it, then it shows you an actual coordinate next to it. So the coordinate there, it's hard to see here, but it's 0.26, or I'm sorry, 0.026, and then negative 25.013. It does say to round to the nearest tenths, but in order to round that one so that a little bit more of the number shows up, I'm going to round to hundredths. So that'll become 0.03. It's still very close to 0, and then negative 25.0. So if I go ahead and write that down, I'll write it again here. 0.03 negative 25.0. Now you would type this in because it's going to be a short answer question with no spaces and typing it in just like this with the parentheses around the ordered pair and a comma between it. Just make sure you're rounding your answers to the nearest tenths. I didn't do that on just this one because if I did that, it would have been 0.0. And technically, that is looking like it's the y-intercept is 0 comma negative 25, but this minimum is a little bit past it's a little bit to the right of the y-intercept. So it's just a little bit like right next to it. And then same thing for the rest of the graph. I'm just going to go ahead and draw a sketch so that you have it. Something like this. So that's kind of the graph. We just found this lowest point, I kind of didn't draw it the best. This should be the lowest point here, which is at 0.3, negative 25. But really the answer is just the ordered pair. I'm just doing the graph so that you can see it. All right, so we're just about done here. 2 more of these. The number 8, you're factoring this polynomial. So the first question you always ask yourself is, what is the GCF? What do they all have in common? And that would be a 5. For all the numbers, you could divide them by 5. For the variables, you want to take the lowest number of x's. So this 75x has just a single x there. That's what we want to factor out. And when you do that factoring out, you write 5x and a parentheses after it. I'm going to go ahead and divide by 5x everywhere here. You don't have to physically write that in, but it can help. So then we have 5x cubed divided by 5x would be x squared, because the 5's would cancel, and then you have 1 less x. 10 divided by 5 is 2, and then you have 1 less x again, so that's an x. And negative 75x over 5x, these x's are gone, and negative 75 divided by 5 is negative 15. That I need to factor further, so I can make that little x method again if I'd like to, where I ask myself which 2 numbers multiply to give me negative 15 but add to give me 2. And those 2 numbers are negative 3 and 5. So I go to my 2 parentheses, type or write in each of those factors. Don't forget the 5x in front. This would be the final answer, which is 5x times x minus 3 and x minus 5. If it was a short answer question, you'd have to type all of this in just like you see it. But if it was multiple choice, you just want to make sure all 3 factors are there. Okay, and then we have one final problem here. When you're writing a polynomial in standard form, this is kind of what standard form looks like. Whereas the answer I wrote here, this is either intercept form or factored form. So we're going to first start off by writing it in intercept form, and then we'll eventually get to something that looks like this in standard form. So first thing you need to remember is that when the zeros are given and you're putting it into an equation, you have to switch their signs. So 3 becomes x minus 3. The negative 2 becomes x plus 2. And then the 4 would just be x minus 4. So all of those switch signs. And now we're going to go ahead and start multiplying. So you can either use FOIL or box method, but you kind of have to ignore one of the parentheses at a time. So we're only going to look at 2 of them. So I'll go ahead and do the box this time just because I used FOIL on the front page. So it'd be x minus 3 and x plus 2, but you can use FOIL instead if you'd like to. It would be x squared minus 3x plus 2x minus 6. And we're combining at the diagonal here. So this would be x squared minus 1x, or you can call it just an x, negative x, minus 6. That all will go in one parentheses, with the x minus 4 still kind of hanging out in its own parentheses. The y equals is there just because this is a function. You could have written f of x equals as well. That doesn't really change the problem. But now I have a trinomial and a binomial. Now I need an even bigger box. Now, if you choose to use FOIL instead both times, the second time you have to do FOIL here, you have to be careful because it's not just 4 terms. It's not technically FOIL. It would be multiplying the x times all 3 terms and the negative 4 times all 3 terms. So you'd get 6 terms, and then you would have to simplify further. Let's see what it looks like with the box. So I wrote out on the top the trinomial, x squared minus 1x minus 6, x minus 4 along the side. So then I can start multiplying. So I have x cubed and then negative either 1x squared, or I can just say negative x squared, negative 6x, a negative 4x squared, and then a positive 4x. You don't have to put the little plus sign with it. It's implied to be positive. And same thing with the 24. It's positive, so you can either write plus 24 or just leave it like that. All right, so now we combine at the diagonals here that have the common terms. These are both squares. These are both x's. So my final answer looks like this. Y equals x cubed is the first term. Then I have a negative x squared and a negative 4x squared. That becomes a negative 5x squared. This negative 6x plus 4x would be a negative 2x. And then the last term is 24. This is the final answer that you would type out. Now, when you go to type this into Michigan Virtuals, because the short answer question, they're looking for it typed out, you have to make sure to use those little caret keys. So it would be like x caret key 3 minus 5 caret key, x caret key squared, and so on. To get that caret key to show up, if you're not sure where it is, it's Shift 6 on a keyboard. So that's how we get, each of those, and then you would just do the rest. So this is to type it into computer. So on the actual quiz, you'll need to type it out, and just like you see it with those little caret keys. All right, and that's about it. If you do have any questions, feel free to come in the afternoon for some extra help.